Who am I? You sure you want to know?
Who am I? Are you sure you want to know? It's so good. So good. It's so good.
How's the pie?
So good.
So good. Look, there are no shortage of Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy video essays for you to watch and to enjoy and to dissect and yada, yada, yada. And this is going to be another one of those videos. Maybe, I don't know. I just woke up today, threw on Spider-Man 2 and felt like talking about it. And not just talking about Spider-Man 2, which is the gold standard of Spider-Man movies, superhero movies, life in general. I just want to talk about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy and why it has stood the test of time all these years, why I think it is still heralded as one of the best superhero trilogies of all time, one of the best trilogies of all time. And yes, it's not rocket science to sit here and say that, oh, they're just so earnest and they're so sincere and they're so down to earth and there's no ulterior motive in setting up a universe. And we will talk about the sincerity of all of it and the earnestness of all of it. But I do think there's something more to that not a lot of people talk about. And that is that this trilogy of movies, the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, were the first ever live action cinematic movie theater incarnation of Peter Parker and Spider-Man. Obviously, we had a TV show, and that was great for what it was. But this was the Christopher Reeve Superman or the Michael Keaton Batman. This had the weight of carrying a new character into the hearts and minds of moviegoers. And look, I love the Christopher Reeve Superman. I don't love the Michael Keaton Batman, the first original 1989 Batman. I like it for what it is, and I appreciate that people do love it. I do know that those movies are widely known as successful movies to kick off the Superman and Batman characters. But where those franchises failed is where Sam Raimi and Spider-Man and Tobey Maguire succeeded. And that was making a sequel that knocks the original out of the park. And when you introduce a character like Spider-Man to the masses with a very good movie, a very good origin story, still has its G's, yes, of course, and we'll get to that in a second. But then you come out with the second one and it doubles the quality. That's how you stand the test of time. And then the third one comes around and it's just batshit chaos, which leads us to the memeability of all these movies. And memeability is important nowadays in terms of getting movies to stand the test of time and to become classics. If you can jive with the internet, and not even when you're trying to, that's the key here. You know, when Willem Dafoe says,
you know, I'm something of a scientist myself.
Sam Raimi didn't write that thinking, I got it. It just is what it was. And that's where the earnestness comes into play. All three of these movies, in my opinion, did not seem like their main goal was to show you some cool Spider-Man action. Look, it's in there for sure. And Sam Raimi is the ultimate entertainer. We know this. But every movie had such human connection. The Uncle Ben stuff in the first Spider-Man will rip your absolute heart out. Then you have the speech in Spider-Man 2. I believe there's a hero in all of us. I watched it today and literally started crying. It's an unbelievable moment. And there are not really moments like that in today's day and age in terms of comic book movies. Look, I love the MCU as much as the next person. I shed many a tear over Avengers Endgame, and it was a great run. And now they're a little hit or miss, and they'll be back, I'm sure. But I think the ultimate difference between movies made in the early 2000s, especially Spider-Man movies or superhero movies, and movies made today is that there's a level of sarcasm isn't the right word, but there's a level of cynicism somehow injected into these movies now that didn't exist back then. And the best way I can describe that, and I don't mean to compare the No Way Home trilogy or the Homecoming trilogy, I guess is what I should call it, to the Raimiverse trilogy, but those are the only two trilogies we have in terms of Spider-Man movies. Hopefully we get Andrew's third. Make it happen. Is the way Mary Jane finds out that Peter's Spider-Man.
I'm just gonna tell you.
MJ,
I'm Spider-Man.
What?
That's what you were gonna say, that you're Spider-Man.
No.
In the second one, it's all this build-up. I love you, Mary Jane. I'm different. You want to go get some chow mein? He gives up being Spider-Man. He thinks he can convince her not to get married. Then he takes it back, but she wants him, and then he has to say, I don't love you, and he's lying, and I have to protect you, and blah, blah, blah. And at the end of Spider-Man 2, when his mask comes off, and she sees him, and he turns around, it is one of the best movie moments ever. Ever. And you get the, hey, this is really heavy. And then he throws it and he saves her. And she realizes this is why he's been absent my whole adult life. Doesn't matter. I'm going to leave Jameson at the altar and marry Peter Parker. It's unbelievable. And I understand when you're making these movies, you have to try to do something a little different, or at least on paper, that's what you think you have to do. So in Andrew's movies, it's Gwen Stacy, and he tells her pretty early on, and that's a nice romantic little scene, but it's kind of played as a gag when she's like, oh boy, I'm in trouble. But then you get to the Mary Jane Peter scene in Far From Home, which is a movie I really do like. And he's like, MJ, I have to tell you something. And she goes, oh yeah, you're Spider-Man? No, I did. How did you know? Peter Washington? I mean, you're always leaving. Like, it's very like, oh, you're Spider-Man. You're Spider-Man now. And I think when we look back on these early Tobey movies, the thing that you connect with so much that it's hard to put your finger on, it's really not tangible. It's just a feeling that you have. And people say earnestness or sincerity. I think when you watch it, you just remember what it was like to be a kid. The simplicity of waking up, going to school, talking to your crush, doing it all over again. And your biggest fear is, who are you going to sit by on the bus that day? Stop the bus! I can't help it. And I think the movies nowadays kind of reflect the times that they're in. And now we're in a more complex social climate with Twitter and with politics and yada, yada, yada. And these movies, these MCU movies, come out and they kind of lean into the sarcastic cynicism of what it's like to be alive today. When in the early 2000s, it just felt a little bit easier. And these movies were a little more simple. And it was, this story is about a girl. That girl, Mary Jane Watson. So look, Tobey's movies obviously had the distinct advantage and disadvantage of coming out early, right? You still got to make great movies, and I think they did. They crushed it out of the park with the first two, and the third one people are coming around on. I've always been lukewarm on it. It's obviously not great, and the Tobey Maguire stuff is tough. But I think the third act of that movie is honestly incredible. And then when him and Harry team up, hang on to what? I've been quoting a lot this whole time, and I think that's important to talk about. The meme ability of these movies is really what's allowed these movies to get into the younger people's brains. And some people could see the memes as a positive or a negative, and some people could say that these movies are dated. I mean, look at all this stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I get it. The movies are dated, okay? Richard Donner's Superman is dated. Michael Keaton's Batman is dated. Every movie that comes out at some point will be dated, believe it or not. Like Oppenheimer will be dated in 100 years if we're still alive. So I don't think it's a fair criticism to say a movie's dated. It's a fact, but it's not a fair criticism because when Sam Raimi's making these movies, or when anyone's making any movie in any time period, they don't know 20 years from now that these things aren't going to be how people want to see a movie now. So you kind of have to just accept that that's what you're getting into when you revisit these movies. However, these movies are endlessly quotable because the internet has latched onto them in such a way. The people that grew up with them, like myself, I think Spider-Man 3 was one of the first movies I've ever seen in theaters that I can remember. We've taken these movies and we've immortalized them to the millionth power. I could probably quote different points in any of these movies for upwards of 2 hours. I can go from Spider-Man 1, I kid you not, his father's gonna fire your father. Help him, Harry! Which one? Had to be an old lady with a stick. It's you who's out, Gobby! Out of your mind. Then you get Spider-Man 2, you get something like the power of the sun in the palm of my hand, which is still coming up today because if you watched Across the Spider-Verse, that line was referenced.
Wow. The power of the multiverse in the palm of my hand.
And everybody knows how quotable these movies are, but I've already brought up one of my favorite scenes of the movie, and it's when Aunt May tells Peter, basically, I know you're Spider-Man, I know you're having a tough time of it, but people need you.
Everybody loves a hero. People line up for them, cheer them, scream their names, and years later they'll tell how they stood in the rain for hours just to get a glimpse of the one who taught him to hold on a second longer. I believe there's a hero in all of us.
And in terms of earnest, down-to-earth, sincere dialogue, nothing, in my opinion, beats that scene in any Spider-Man movie or in a lot of superhero movies in today's day and age. If you remember WandaVision, when Vision had that unbelievable line, "What is grief if not love persevering?" And people were like, oh my, what an unbelievable line of dialogue. And listen, I don't disagree with that. But I think that was so impactful in the minds of people who have watched the MCU because we don't get a lot of that in the MCU. And if you go back to the Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, you have Aunt May saying, "I believe there's a hero in all of us." That whole monologue is truly unbelievable, human level shit. And then the cherry on top, and this is the difference between the humor now and the humor back then, is that she gives us this whole monologue where we're like, does she know that he's Spider-Man? As you're wiping away the tears. And then she says to him,
Do you think you could lift that desk and put it into the garage for me? But don't strain yourself.
Okay.
which is that grandma, grandpa, easy breezy humor of, can you handle picking up a box? I don't want you to hurt your back. My back. It's just, it's really hard to it's hard to quantify, why these movies are so important to me and to so many people who have seen them. And if you know people, or if you've just met people and you go, oh, what kind of movies do you like? And you're like, oh, Spider-Man. And you're like, Tobey Maguire trilogy. And you're like, hell yeah. You're best friends. You just are. Pizza time. It just starts spilling out of your mouth. And they're so important. And they're still the gold standard. And the fact that we got to see Tobey again in No Way Home. And look, this is coming from someone whose favorite Spider-Man is Andrew Garfield. His movies, not so much. But as far as Peter Parker goes, he's the one that I actually grew up with. So he's my favorite. He's my favorite actor, so that helps. But I don't know. This was like a word of vomit for 20 minutes. I just wanted to come on here and say the Raimi trilogy matters. It absolutely does. It still matters. It's still relevant. These movies are being re-released, which is why I decided to talk about them and why I decided to watch them and blah, blah, blah. For Spirit Week in high school, I dressed up as the Human Spider, Tobey Maguire's first homemade Spider-Man suit. So clearly this means a lot to me, and I just wanted to come on here and tell you why I think it matters. And I don't know if I ever got there, but I do think it has to do with the fact that this was the first of its kind, where 1989 and 1976 were the Superman and Batman first of its kind. That was a long time ago. So those are sort of falling by the wayside in terms of being super, super relevant. But these, 20 years ago or whatever, the first one came out, these are still here. And I don't think they're ever going to go away. Hey there, viewer. Thank you so much for watching. Clicking on my face. I've decided we're going to do reviews again. I've done a couple. I've titled them Why They Matter or whatever. I think I'm going to change that to just whatever I think about the movie is going to be the title. And then Why They Matter or Why They Don't Matter is going to be a separate thing about things that have already come out that I want to talk about. So comment below other things you'd like me to discuss. Drop likes, drop comments. Please be sure to subscribe. It is free after all, no charge to you. I love you guys. I'll see you next time.